Hello and welcome to our event. This is our third instalment of Surrey Business Society's Sustainability in Business Series 2021. And we are joined today by Liam Jones from OLIO, a very exciting food sharing app which has started within the UK. So Liam, it's excellent to have you here with us today. Very excited to have this discussion with you. And could you just first of all start by your role and a brief overview of OLIO for those watching who aren't aware of what it is?
Of course. Good, Jones. I'm business development OLIO, which is the only neighbour-to-neighbour food sharing app. We connect neighbours with each other and volunteers with local businesses so that surplus food and other things, so non-food items too, can be shared, not thrown away. To sort of talk you through the OLIO story, how we started and our founders. The app was founded in 2015, towards the tail end of 2015, by two women, Tessa and Sasha. And the story goes that Tessa was in Switzerland, where she had been working for about a year, and she was packing up her things in preparation for moving back to the UK when she realised that she had leftover food in her fridge and her pantry. Now, Tessa grew up on a farm, so she understands the value of food. She knows exactly how much work goes into producing the food that eventually ends up on our plates, and she couldn't bear to throw her food away. So she packed this food up into boxes and she hit the streets of Switzerland looking for takers. She knocked on the door of a friendly neighbour, but they didn't answer. She tried giving it to random passers-by on the street, but they looked at her like she was some sort of crazy woman. And so she returned home a bit dejected and decided that there should be some means of connecting people who have surplus food with people who want it. It's a very, very simple idea. It's one we've never deviated from. Once she got back to the UK, she pitched the idea to her friend Sasha. Sasha's eyes lit up immediately, and she very quickly became Tessa's co-founder. Now, the first thing they did after they had the idea for forming OLIO was desk research in order to understand the scale of the problem, and what they found was genuinely shocking. So they put some sort of numbers behind why OLIO exists. Between a third and one half of all food produced globally is wasted. This equates to an annual value exceeding 2.7 trillion US dollars, and then it weighs more than 1.3 billion tons. In the US, and this is something that's always struck me, food waste accounts for 1.3% of total GDP. So that's, it's a level of market inefficiency that we simply don't see in other industries. Now, at the same time as this enormous waste is going on, 800 million people worldwide are starving or malnourished. That's 1 in 9 of us. And every single one of these people could be sufficiently fed on less than a quarter of the food that we waste in the Western world. If we put aside just for a moment the moral implications of wasting all this food while people go hungry, the environmental consequences of food waste are catastrophic. 25% of our total freshwater consumption is spent on growing foods we never eat, and it takes a landmass larger than China to grow it. If you can picture this landmass, these aren't fresh green fields stretching out into the distance. This is land that's been deforested, soil that's been degraded, species that are being kicked out of their homes just so we can grow food that we then throw in the bin. And once it's in the bin, to make matters worse, food waste invariably ends up in landfill, where it decomposes without access to oxygen to create methane. And methane is 25 times more harmful to our atmosphere than carbon dioxide. A group of climate change scientists called Project Drawdown recently put together a study of the most impactful solutions to the climate crisis, or the issues we are most pressing to solve, and food waste came out as number one. When you lump all of the sort of environmental, the greenhouse gas effects of food waste together, if food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases, behind only the US and China. So, our long-term vision for OLIO is an unashamedly bold one, a very bold one. We're working towards 1 billion OLIOers by 2030, so within the next 10 years. And this is so that our most precious resource, which is our life source, food, can be shared and not thrown away. Because if humanity is to stand any chance whatsoever of limiting global heating to 1.5 degrees, then it's absolutely imperative that we achieve this goal. And in order to achieve it, we need an innovative solution that can be adopted by millions of people very quickly. We're often asked at OLIO who our main competitor is, and when somebody asks this question, I'm always, I can tell that they want me to tell them, 3 or 4 different apps that we're competing against. But we always say no, that our main competitor is the rubbish bin. what this means is that we're attempting to change consumer behavior, and we're attempting to change it at scale. And I think that that's what the most truly innovative and important companies are all about. They're not about flogging people things that they probably don't really need. They're actually doing something much more important and much harder than that, which is to completely change consumer behavior.
That's incredible. And hopefully that's given our audience an insight into kind of the values of Olio and what you're trying to achieve. So thank you, Liam. Now, our next question is, who does your app mainly target, and is this customer base the base that actually uses it?
Yeah, so it kind of works backwards. So our marketing campaigns are based on surveying the app to see who is most likely to use the app and then who is most likely to share food on it. So our user base skews female, generally younger, so sort of 20s to mid 40s. If you combine those two categories, it works out sort of like young mums if you want to be sort of specific customer profile. And also it's quite interesting when you look at other apps involved in food waste and sustainability, it's quite similar. So like Karma or Too Good To Go, who both do work in food waste, their user base is quite similar to that.
Okay, excellent. And can you describe just what the extent of the UK's specifically problem is with food waste?
Yes, so the issues that I described before, between a third and one half of all food produced globally, that generalizes around the world, including in the UK. So between a third and a half of the food that we produce is wasted. To put it in more specific terms, I mean, the average UK family wastes 25%, a quarter of their weekly shop. As households, we waste generally over £800 worth of food every year. And there are something I think is actually really important to say is that there are some surprising culprits for this. So, some of the more shocking images of food waste, and a lot of the stuff that people will have seen over the pandemic, is things like, huge fields full of unpicked produce that then has to be sown back into the earth, and, supermarket skip waste and that kind of thing. But actually, the main culprit, or the single biggest contributor to the food waste problem, is households, it's individuals. So over half of food waste occurs in the home, which means that, on the one hand, we as individuals, you and me, are half the problem. But, if you're a bit more sort of optimistic, glass full, as we try to be, then it also means that we can be half the solution. And that's quite, that's what's exciting about our platform, I think.
Absolutely. I'm sure a lot of people listening today would be shocked to hear those stats and those figures. But if you think about it, it happens. Think about how when you throw away your food because it's gone off or you bought too much, it's very visible to see that could be true. So thank you for sharing that. Next, I'd like to ask, how does Olio help directly to tackle this issue, and what's the overall impact been? So kind of getting into the nitty gritty of how the app works and how consumers can engage with it.
Well, how do we help directly tackle the issue? Well, we enable food sharing and non-food sharing. So we help build and strengthen local communities. And that actually does three things, I think. One is we have tremendous environmental impact, and I had to write figures down because they change all the time. But we've got over 3.5 million users. We've shared more than 14.3 million meals since we started, and there are now more than 1 million food listings per month. So the environmental impact is huge, very impressive, and it's growing very quickly. But we're also helping to tackle two other issues, I think, one of which is food poverty, food insecurity, which I've already touched on. And another one is loneliness. So 1 in 9 people in the UK report being always or sometimes lonely, which is just heartbreaking. And that's something that we help combat because we're using mobile technology step interactions.
Absolutely. And I think that community piece is really important as well. It's becoming like a society of Olios. I can't even say it. But people who use
Olios,
the app. Olios. I'll get used to it. And I think that's really important, that the more people that you reach out to, the more we'll share it with their friends and say, oh, you can get my food next time that you're on it as well, which I think is really interesting. Yeah, excellent. I also wanted to ask, what has been kind of the best reaction to the app that you have personally witnessed?
Well, so that kind of follows on quite nicely from the last one, because the things that the community is the community aspect. So I remember like one of the most rewarding things about working at OLIO is that you get to see the customer feedback. So people will write in with their OLIO stories, and it's, it just makes you feel warm and fuzzy. So there was a woman. I just remember her story. She wrote in a couple of months ago to say that her mum had died like a year prior, and she'd sort of turned into a bit of a recluse. She hadn't left the house for 12 months, and OLIO was the sort of spark that led her to going out. Back into the community was, that kind of thing's really lovely. And there are loads of stories like that over the pandemic of people whose confidence had been knocked, and who were looking for something to do and a way to meet people and a way to engage with people under those conditions, and people who lost their jobs. So we're using the app for the first time. But also, there's loads of stuff I can't remember. Where started. There's an older couple, who wanted to volunteer for the now, and I remember one of them. So the wife wasn't mobile, so she couldn't go collect the food. But the husband didn't know how to use mobile technology, so they formed this kind of team where the husband would go get the food, and then she would use the app to list it and share with her community. So yeah, just loads of little personal stories like that.
That's really sweet to hear. Yeah, and I think it is something that definitely should bring people together and kind of become a competition. How much can you kind of give to other people this month? Oh, I'm giving more than you, that kind of thing. That'd be really interesting as well from kind of a student's perspective, how that would work on a university campus. I'm not sure if you've seen much of it happening within universities, but yeah, I think it would be really interesting because we only really buy for ourselves and we stock up in our fridges and our cupboards, and a lot of it can go to waste if you're buying like big packs of things to save money. Yeah,
I really agree with that, by the way. So
yeah.
So I think universities that's one of our key, to my mind at least, that's a sort of key growth area. We know that loads of students use the app, but we haven't until very recently, and we've had to delay this. So we recently launched or put together a student ambassadors pack. So it's an initiative that will encourage students to use OLIO, and to encourage other people on campus to use OLIO too. But yeah, no, students are a great example of a group of people that can get a lot of value out of OLIO from meeting people and for getting free food, frankly.
Absolutely. And on that note, actually, if there are any students listening today or watching this YouTube live who would like to leave their experiences with OLIO in the YouTube comments, that would be amazing. And also, if anyone watching has any questions kind of on the business side, entrepreneurial side, please do let us know in the comments as well, and we will get to them towards the end of the event. My next question for you, Liam, is what has been the most difficult or challenging part of growing the business to the size it is today with over 3 million users, and how consistent was the growth to get to this stage?
Well, the answer to those two questions is kind of the same, because the most difficult part is at the start. So that's when it's most challenging, when you're trying to motivate people to use the app, and they go on the app and there's not many users, so there's no food. And so you have to really, really work. You have to work very, very hard in that first period to start getting people to use the app and to share the app. And you also have to come up with letting people realize. So one issue that we used to face, is that people would log on to, we could have thousands of food listings on the app, and still people would write in saying there's no food being shared yet. And the reason is that people put food up on the app, or people would list food, it would get requested really quickly, so it would get pinned down, and then somebody would log in and they wouldn't see it. So they'd have to log in at a very specific time in order to see that there is actually food sharing going on our app. So we had to come up with a solution to that, which is showing having a just gone section, which we still get loads of complaints about, by the way. People get really annoyed about having a just gone section, and it's like a tease. Here's what you could have had. But it's really important, because people need to see that there is food sharing going on, and if you keep reloading the app, then you will eventually find something. But the and how consistent has the growth been? COVID has been like a rocket ship under us. So as far as I've seen in the startup world, COVID has been either really like a death knell or a real opportunity for startups. So for us, we were fortunate that it was the second type. So we grew as much in the first 5 months of the pandemic as we did in the first 5 years of OLIO. We grew really, really quickly. And part of that is just, the people needing the whole idea of community being sort of right at the front of the national conversation. People being at home, realizing how much food they're wasting, being more likely to share it with people. But it's also, I just think, when you start up, and your community based, and tipping point of hopefully
struggled, but to hear that you've kind of used this technology and this way of reaching out to people, and like you said, that community aspect that's been so important during the pandemic to your advantage, and to do something good with it is even better, I think. So that's really great to hear. And I also wanted to know a bit more about the volunteer and food waste heroes program that OLIO has. Can you shed some more light on what that exactly is as well?
Certainly, because that's what I do. That's what I spend most of my time on. So the Food Waste Heroes program, the volunteer program, involves matching our pool of volunteers, who number something like 23,000 people in the UK right now. We match them with local businesses. So these could be schools, restaurants, universities, offices, really any business that produces any amount of surplus food. The volunteers will attend these businesses at an agreed time, generally closing time or the end of lunch service, whenever the food is otherwise going to be thrown away. The volunteers will collect this food, they will take it home, and then they'll redistribute it among their local community from their own home via the app.
Awesome. That sounds like something I personally would love to get involved with, and I know a lot of my friends and colleagues would love to do that as well, so I'll definitely spread the word on that one. I'd also like to ask about OLIO being part of any wider programs or initiatives such as the food wastage footprint, if that's something that OLIO is considering to be part of, and how that would kind of work out for the company.
Well, so really, I'm not the best person. Tessa would be the CEO would be the best person to answer the question on where we sit with that. But I mean, we do lots of work with DEFRA, so like government branches, RAP, which is a major anti-waste charity, worldwide charity, and we collaborate with other sort of players in the space. So like Fair Share, for example, we have, which is the nation's biggest food charity. We work with them at Tesco stores, for example.
Amazing. That kind of leads on to my next question quite nicely, and that is, what can governments and supermarkets do to also make a difference and reduce the burden on consumers who feel this pressure of eco-anxiety and wanting to do the right thing and not wasting food? What can the government and supermarkets do to support this?
Well, supermarkets can sign up to OLIO to redistribute their surplus food, but I think one thing that governments can do is, if you look at other countries, so France, for example, has really good anti-food waste laws. So they have a law in place which says that businesses have to, if it's possible for them to redistribute food, then they have to do it. We don't have anything like that. And I think that legislation is coming, but it will get here. But it's just going to take a little bit of time to pass. I also think that there's a real responsibility on people who are working in the sort of public education and that kind of thing, to help people make the connection between food waste and sustainability and the environment, because I don't think that's something that people automatically make. So there's like a couple of steps to explaining to people exactly why food waste is so bad for the environment. So that's something that they could do, and I think education is a big part of that. So I don't know what it's like now. You're younger than me, but no one taught me anything about sustainability in school. I had to do it all myself, and that shouldn't continue. I mean, I saw something today actually. There was an article saying that 70% of teachers have had no sustainability or environmentalism type training, which I think is really bad. It's something we need to tackle, because young people need to be taught about this kind of stuff, and they need to know what the priorities are, so that they can help make a change.
I absolutely agree. I find a lot of the time I'm teaching myself and hearing from friends what their experiences are with food waste and sustainability, and it kind of almost always the conversation goes on to things like plastic pollution, and which is also a massive issue, but it's things that are a bit more out of our reach. We don't see where plastic ends up a lot of the time. However, we see the food going in the bin and we don't stop it.
The plastic thing. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. The plastic thing is because that's something that it's a tricky one, because for one thing, it's really, really important to reduce plastic waste, but it's not causing global temperatures to rise in the same way as an issue like food waste is. But I think plastic waste is at the front of people's consciousness. Someone approached me at an event once and said that we need a crisp packet in a blowhole moment for food waste, because it's really easy to explain to people why plastic waste is bad. It's a bit harder to explain to them why food waste is bad.
No, yeah, I definitely think I agree with that. That education is a huge piece in this, and not only educating from the government or societal level that, in education we need to learn about it during the system of school, but also within our everyday lives, teaching each other about it, talking to each other about it, and making it more of an open subject, which it should be. It shouldn't be something that we shy away from talking about because we feel bad about it. We should be talking about it to make a difference. So thank you for your insight. I think that's really helpful for our listeners today. So the next question that I have, and you kind of touched upon this earlier, is OLIO the only app of its kind? What are the competitors like? You mentioned Too Good to Go, was it?
Yeah, we're the only one of our kind, but there are other apps in different spaces. So, like, there's no other neighbor-to-neighbor food sharing app that's building a community in the way that we are. And there's probably a pretty good reason for that, which is that we haven't monetized yet. We're not a profit-making company. So the competitive space is pretty free right now. But there are apps at different stages. So there's a concept called the food waste recovery hierarchy, which ranks the different stages of food waste in order of priority. So, like, the first thing is to reduce food waste in the first place. That's what every business's priority should be. Then to sell the food, and then to sell it at a discount, which is where someone like Too Good to Go or Karma comes in. Then to donate it to charity, which is where someone like FareShare comes in. And if all else fails, we're sort of proudly at the bottom of the pile for donate it to the local community, which is where OLIO comes in. So, but that's just on the Food Waste Heroes part of the business. There's no one else that's enabling peer-to-peer food sharing like we are. Well, actually, there's a company in Germany that does it, but it's like a desktop system with .many. It's been going for ages, but it's like a not-for-profit system. So yeah, there's no direct competitor.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear. Do you think more will pop up in the future, kind of following in OLIO's footsteps?
Well, I think it depends on whether or not we ever figure out how to make money from it. So, like, basically, yeah. I think if in 5 years OLIO is ubiquitous worldwide, then it's only natural that there's going to be competitors pop up along the way. But we have to get there first, and I think we are sort of the canary in the coal mine kind of thing. If it works, then we'll have competitors. If it doesn't, then we won't. Then we'll prove that it doesn't work.
Absolutely. I guess we'll watch this space and see what happens. I'm sure OLIO will only continue to grow, and hopefully you'll make money at some point. So my next question is, what do you think OLIO's place in society is? Do you think it should be a requirement for people to kind of have it and to consider it? Do you think people should have to have it on their phones when they first download an app?
It sounds a bit authoritarian. Everybody must have OLIO. It's on every phone site in the UK. You can't delete it.
No.
Like your calculator or something. But Yeah, I think they should have it. I just don't think they should be forced to have it. Um, yeah, where should its place in society be? I think it should be a place where people turn when they've reached the sort of end of the learning, when they're on the learning journey that I sort of subjected you to earlier about the issue of food waste and why it's such an evil thing.
Amazing. And here's a quick reminder for anyone watching in our audience today. If you want to share where you are in your learning journey for food waste and sustainability in general, please do let us know in the YouTube comments. We'd love to hear your view on things. And also what you think OLIO is capable of. Do you think it could take over? Do you think it could become a required app on all phones? So the next question that I have for you is a bit more personal. So during your time at OLIO, what has been your biggest achievement and the biggest achievement that the company has had as well?
So on the personal level, so my job really is to help businesses waste less food. So redistribute food via our Food Waste Heroes program. And what that means is it's really, really rewarding whenever a new client comes on board, a new donor comes on board, because I can kind of look at that and go, you know, we're now at 2,700 Tesco stores nationwide, and the amount, like the environmental impact of that is just enormous. So that's hugely rewarding. The biggest achievement that the company has had, I think, what springs to mind sort of instinctively when you say that is our response to the pandemic, and how we managed to, we didn't stop throughout the pandemic, as in our volunteers were still active. Tesco, who I said before we work with, saw us as part of, an essential part of their operations, which meant that OLIO was an essential service. And yeah, in helping people who were sort of thrown into food poverty but had never experienced it before. I mean, that's something that, I was speaking to a local council recently, and they said one of the biggest problems from the pandemic is that loads of people are going hungry, and they're not people who traditionally go hungry. So they're not sort of used to finding avenues for dealing with it. And OLIO has really stepped in, I think, over the last year or so to help alleviate, some of that problem, a fraction of it. But yeah, I think that's a real achievement.
That's excellent. And that kind of leads on very nicely to my next question. So what has it been like operating during the pandemic? Has anything changed for the operations of the company? For example, for the safety measures in place to stop the spread of COVID-19?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. So during initial lockdown, we had to put some measures in place, like, so first of all, we had to seek advice to make sure that it was still safe to do. So we have a food safety advisor, a guy called Sterling Crew, who's amazing. And he told us that it was generally accepted that the virus wasn't being transmitted via food packaging. So that was sort of a big tick. And then Tesco and our other sort of food donors who were still open told us that they wanted us to continue. So then that's sort of another tick. And then we had to come up with a way of advising people to keep using the app without, because, there's good argument saying it was more necessary that it was used during the pandemic than ever before. So we had to enable that while minimizing the risk of transmission. We did things like doorstep interactions, like, you're not allowed to touch anyone when you hand over the food. When the rule was in place of the hour exercise thing we had during the first lockdown, we advised people to only to do their food sharing during that hour of exercise, so that people weren't making unnecessary trips out of the home and they weren't leaving the house 20 times or whatever. So yeah, we had to come up with a few tweaks to our model, but we did that quite quickly and quite effectively, I think.
No, that's really good to hear that you're still able to provide the service that I guess people were beginning to rely on in some ways, and people were really coming to use as a community and really make the most of. So that's really cool. And I really like the piece about encouraging people to only go out like within that hour of exercise, because again, that is part of the kind of mission of the company, I guess, to make sure people are safe and they're fed, but they're also safe in terms of COVID, and doing your part, which is really good to hear.
I should also say, sorry, during the pandemic, so on our pandemic operations, one thing that was, quite extreme for my role is basically every restaurant, every food producer in the country shut down overnight. So there was just so much food everywhere that we had to find a way. And then they're coming to us and asking us to help find a way to stop them throwing it in the bin. So, we were redistributing types of food and quantities of food that I'd never seen before. You get a call saying, can you pick up like 7 tons of cheese or something? And we had to find a way of, tweaking our model to accommodate that. And one thing that was amazing was how good our volunteers were. I mean, I was so proud of our community and of our volunteers. They did such an amazing job at finding a home for just enormous quantities of food. I mean, I still don't know quite how they did it.
No, that's excellent. And that kind of fits in nicely with a question that I had sent to me prior to the event. And that's about kind of the role of events and the hospitality industry and how that kind of fits in with what you're doing. So I guess prior to the pandemic, did you have a lot of partnerships with kind of events companies, maybe hotels and things like that? Or is that something that you think about doing in the future?
Well, so events companies, yes, we've done a number of events. So I remember doing things like, sort of like corporate summer parties and stuff like that. But events can be quite tricky to organize collections from, because I remember doing, I've forgotten what it's called, but the big sort of Brixton summer, like the farmer thing. Anyway, Lambeth Park show, and there's like 80 food vendors, and they all shut at the same time, and you have to try and figure out a way of getting 80 food vendors spread out over a massive distance to get all their food into, either get them to put it all in one place so that a volunteer can come pick it up, or get a volunteer or a number of volunteers to go. That's really, so that's big event food from, but smaller lots of and hotel.
No, that sounds really cool. Like as well, and I can only imagine the logistics of something like a farmer's market or something where there's so much food on, that being quite hard, like you said, to coordinate with however many volunteers you might have. That's really interesting to hear. I wanted to touch upon the kind of technology that is used for the OLIO app, because I know there are people listening who are kind of interested in that kind of side of things, maybe starting this for solving other societal issues. So how important or unique is the technology that you specifically use for the app in general?
I'm the wrong person to ask about the tech side of things. What I would say, so when we started, what the founders did was in order to test the concept, because what we did when we set up, well, what the founders did when they set up the app is they identified the problem, they did the research that I talked about before, and then they tested to see whether people were interested in solving the problem. Food waste is a big issue, but do people care about it? That was the question. The answer to that question was a resounding yes. It was like most people, half of the respondents felt physically pained throwing away good food. And so with that in mind, they set up just a WhatsApp group of local people in North London, none of whom knew each other, and asked them to share any food that they would have otherwise thrown away. So like the first OLIO listing was shared via WhatsApp, and it was a bag of shallots, which is very sort of Crouch End where it was, where the trial was run. But the feedback that came out of that trial was that A, people really liked it. B, they were willing to put time into it, so they wanted to volunteer to help spread the idea, which is something that's carried over into our ambassador and our volunteer programs. And C, they said that it didn't have to be much more complicated than a WhatsApp group in order to work. So still today, we've built lots of fancy features around the core food sharing idea, but that product, the core product, is very, very simple. It's you take a picture of your food, you put it on the app, your neighbors can scroll through and see what's available, and then they select an item, and you message each other to decide when and where the food should change hands. So it is not much more complicated than a WhatsApp group at its core, although our tech team might not like me saying that.
I can imagine. No, I think the app and the functionality is quite good as well. Like I had a look at it, and it looks really interesting and friendly to use. I think that's the main thing. You want to be kind of in the consumer's mind as something that's easy to use and something that they want to use. And I think that's maybe the way to do it. I think that is definitely the way to do it.
Well, it's by design. So whenever we get, so one of my friends, for some reason, so I moved house recently, and for some reason, everyone around me, all my friends around me, would seem to be moving house at the same time, and it was really cool seeing my friends use. So when they were moving out, friends of mine I was telling them, just list whatever you were going to chuck, just put it on the app, like plates or candles or whatever. And the feedback that my friends gave me was that they just loved how positive it was, like how sort of happy the community is. How grateful people are. There's a real sort of atmosphere of being thankful and saying thanks. And if you look at the forum on the app, it's all sort of super upbeat and people offering, like food waste tips and all this kind of thing. And all of that is by design. So, when you build a community, there's kind of two ways of interpreting your level of responsibility for that community. There's the idea that you've just created a sort of street, and whatever people do when they meet on that street is up to them. That's sort of, I guess, more the sort of Facebook model. And then you could say, well, no, we're building this community and we want it to be sort of in our image. So we want people to be happy, and we want to take some responsibility for the way people act when they are in that place. And we've very much taken this second option. So that's something that the CEO, Tessa, cares loads about, is making sure that it's always a good place to be and it's always an uplifting experience using the app.
Definitely. And like I said, I think that's really, really important and amazing to hear as well. And I know a lot of the people listening today will find that really encouraging, that you can build a community, even though everyone thinks that it's very secluded on social media and things, but go to apps like Olio and you'll find a completely different story. So that's really touching to hear. Next, I wanted to kind of know what's next for Olio, the next milestones that you want to hit. What's in store?
Well, we need to be a sustainable business. So we've got this far. We've raised upwards of £10 million in funding from investors. And these investors are excited about the idea of tapping into an app or a solution that can help reduce, food waste is such an enormous issue that if somebody can tap into it and, solve a chunk of it, $2.7 trillion worth of food wasted every year, if you can tap into that market a little bit, then that's a very attractive proposition. But Olio doesn't have a natural or obvious monetization track. So like Too Good To Go, for example, take a cut every time that food is sold via the platform. We don't do anything like that. And it's our mission. It's something we're steadfastly committed to, is making sure that the peer-to-peer food sharing part of the app will always be free. You'll never have to pay for food on Olio. But we do have to find a way of turning it into a sustainable business. And we've set ourselves a target of proving this out by the end of this year. So that's the next sort of major milestone. And the thing that I'm excited about is we just launched a sort of a freemium version of the app. So we call it the supporter version of the app. And the supporter wording isn't, that's not an accident. It's deliberate to say, we want people to, there are extra features on the supporter part of the of being an Olio user, so that you get a map feature and stuff like that. But the key reason, or the key sort of motivation that we're trying to get across for becoming an Olio supporter and signing up for £5 a month or whatever, is because you want to see the app continue, and because you believe in the mission and the ideas behind it. So hopefully by the end of this year, we will have proven that enough of our user base wants to do this, or is at least open to doing this, that we can start going back to our investors and saying, look, it does work. We're not crazy.
No, absolutely. And I mean, you've convinced me today. So, and I'm sure you convinced a lot of people listening as well and watching this video that, yeah, definitely we should support Olio, and there's a reason to do it. And that bigger reason is the food waste issue. So that is something that we should all be part of together. Next, I kind of wanted to ask about students. So we have a lot of students listening. We are a student-run society. So what would you suggest to students or anyone else listening who might want to make a positive difference to the world by tackling the food waste problem?
Well, to broaden it out a little bit, to look at sort of that the more circular economy question. One concept that Tessa, the CEO, always, she likes repeating, and that I really believe in, is to view every pound you spend as a vote for the type of world you want to live in. So every time you spend money on something, you're saying, I want this to continue. And every time you don't spend money on something, you're saying, I don't support this. And that's something that I think, especially in young people, like that mentality, if it became widespread, would be, that'd be a really, really good thing. And I think people should see things that way. The problems that we're facing are so enormous, they're so intimidating that it can be totally overwhelming. You look at like the climate crisis or even food waste, which is only a part of the climate crisis. The numbers are just terrifying. But if you focus on doing your own little bit, and this is kind of copying from a Jane Goodall quote, but if you do your own little piece of the jigsaw, she says, and know that other people elsewhere are doing their own little bits too, then that should reassure you a little bit, and at least then you know that you're part of the solution.
Definitely. So that's all the pre-prepared questions that we had. We've had some amazing questions in the YouTube comments coming in. So I will just run through a few of them for the last kind of 10 minutes or so, and we'll just see your take on these and what our users have kind of gleaned from this session as well. So the first question that we have from our audience is, what two sustainability trends have impacted Olio the most this far? And what are the biggest challenges to Olio's growth in the future?
The biggest challenges to Olio's growth in the future are, it is, I keep going on about it, but the monetization part. So we need people to support the app. We need to prove that we can create a sustainable business model. Otherwise, it will fold. That's a sort of existential problem that we're facing. As for the sustainability trends that have affected Olio the most, I'm not sure. It feels like every year there's more and more attention, and there's more more people are joining the zero waste and the zero food waste movements, and that obviously helps us a lot.
Absolutely. And the next question, we've kind of already touched upon this, but how can students get involved with the volunteering and with the ambassador program specifically?
Well, if you download the app, you'll see there is basically you follow the links when you download the app to the volunteer hub, and from there you can make a decision. I should also say that I think I was speaking to somebody from your university recently about potentially setting up collections from your catered sites, so from like the on-site shops and stuff. I don't think that's a done deal yet, but if anyone wants to sort of give them a nudge and say you should sign up to Olio, please feel free.
Absolutely, I'm sure we can make that happen. I'll be in touch with my people, they'll contact your people. No, absolutely, I'm sure we'd love to see that at the University of Surrey campus, because there's a big push now as well, I must say. The sustainability team at the university are doing an amazing job. That I mentioned before this call to you as well. They're promoting all of these events that we're doing, and they're really getting involved in the issues that affect us as students. And I mentioned eco-anxiety as well. That is a massive thing that people are feeling these days. I know a lot of my friends feel it as well. Like, how can we save our planet? We want it to be here for so long, and we want to live in a healthy and safe planet. And what can we do? So it's definitely about taking the steps in the right direction. So I think the university is doing an amazing job, and I'm sure if I can speak on behalf, I'm sure they'd love to, but I can't. Yeah, but from the student perspective, I definitely say there are people that would definitely love to get involved with this. So that's really great to hear that we're taking the steps in the right direction. So my next question from the audience is about the gender usage of Olio. So you mentioned earlier that the app is skewed, was it more towards females?
Skewed females, the more women use it than men,
Yeah. So is there an issue with men engaging with sustainability in general, and is the organization coming up with ways to encourage more men to use the app?
On the second question, are we coming up with ways to encourage more men to use the app? Not really. That's sort of, we kind of have to push open doors, if you see what I mean. We're a startup. We have to build on the, take the easiest road. Why it's like that, I have no idea. I don't know. Something that I learned recently, and I'm just answering a different question now, but there's a generational thing here. What a lot of research finds that older people, so people who have retired and are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, they're not very wasteful at all. And then there are people who are young people who are in their sort of 20s and younger. They're also not very wasteful because they care loads about the environment and sustainability. And the problem is people in that sort of like 40 to 60 age group. That's where the majority of the problem is happening. So we need to find a way of tapping into them. And I think that's the most important thing, because those are also, by the way, the people that are in charge. So we need to really target them.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I guess it is more about the age groups than the gender skew at the moment being the issue. And like you said, the people in power, they need to feel the way we feel as millennials and Gen Z about this issue, and act in the way that maybe our grandparents acted. So I guess it's finding that middle ground where we can say this is beneficial to you more than anyone else, and your children and your grandchildren will live in this world, and we're going to have to deal with it from kind of the mess that's been left, I guess.
Absolutely.
No, that's great. And the next question that we have from our audience is, how has the organization overcome the potential issue of food poisoning and the company perhaps getting sued for it? Is there ever any kind of issues with that?
There's been, I think, nearly 5 million doorstep interactions, and across those interactions we've had like a handful of actual issues. Most people understand that you don't share like stuff that's like horribly, like moldy veg or something like that. The risk of legal repercussions comes more from the volunteer program, because that's B2C food sharing. C2C rules are different. It's kind of up to you. But on the B2C side, businesses need to feel assured that if someone makes a complaint, that they're not going to be held liable, and so do we. So we sign agreements with businesses when they sign up to the app to donate our food, which says that you as a business are responsible for making sure that the food you give us is safe to eat until the moment it's in the hands of the volunteers, after which it becomes volunteers' responsibility to make sure they follow our instructions, and OLIO's responsibility to give them those instructions and make sure that we do it properly. So in order to become a volunteer, you have to pass food safety training. You have to prove to us, after watching a couple of videos, you have to prove to us that you understand how to store, share, and look after the food properly, so that you're not going around poisoning people with Pret a Manger sandwiches or something.
No, absolutely. And I guess kind of the allergy side of it must fit into that as well. So there are people with severe nut allergies. I have a very close friend who suffers from that. So is that kind of another thing that you have to get training on if you're a volunteer?
Well, that's more on the business side. So we ask the businesses to give us, before they're allowed to give us food, or before they can donate, they have to sign that agreement that talks about liability. But they also have to give us the allergen information for all of the food that they donate. So that could be, if it's packaged food, then that's fine because it's on the packaging. But if it's stuff like, sandwiches or something, then you can look on our back-end system, or you can go through a link at the bottom of the food listing to find the allergen information for all the different types of food. We have a compliance team who work very hard to make sure that it is safe. to share food on the app.
Amazing. So rest assured, guys, get sharing. And then my final question from the audience today is, do you think that OLIO will start to become more open for restaurants and supermarkets instead of just the general public? So would you see even more encouragement from the likes of Tesco in the future, perhaps after the pandemic, or even as we're now easing out of it?
Yes. So we're not at like announcing stage yet, but we're having very, very good conversations with a lot of retailers, which would be, massive for us and for the community, like the different types of food and the amounts of food that should be available to our community over the coming months will be even more than it is now. So some very, very exciting stuff in the pipeline and that on that front. But yeah, I mean, it's all of this is driven by customer demand. So, I mean, I was speaking to a supermarket the other day who was saying that they see having an image of as being a sustainable supermarket as being absolutely sort of crucial to keeping their younger customers. So, absolutely. Young people are having an impact because they're putting pressure on businesses to waste less food.
No, that's excellent. Thank you so much. And I guess before we wrap up for today's session, do you have any final words or anything that you'd like to say to our audience who have been listening today and hearing the journey of OLIO and what to kind of watch next?
I don't know. Download OLIO, use the app. The number one thing that I would say. So when people ask us how to get involved, I mean, there are, the volunteer program and the ambassador program is great, but the number one thing that I would encourage people to do, sort of specific to OLIO, is just put some food on there. Just start listing some food on there, because you'll find that you might go onto the app, and if you live in, somewhere that's a bit more, that's not in the center of London, for example, you might see, if you live in a rural area, there might not be loads of food available in your immediate vicinity. But if you start listing food on the app, then you will start building a community of food sharers. And that way you can have a real impact. And you'll also, meet some new people. So yeah, that's what I would encourage as a takeaway.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great way to round up. So thank you again, Liam, for your time today. And I hope you've enjoyed yourself talking about OLIO's journey and all the things that our listeners and viewers can get involved in. And I know I've taken a lot away from this session as well.
Thanks, Gemma.
Thank you. No worries. Thank you all for listening. Just to let you know, we do have one session tomorrow as well, which is with the company Upcircle Beauty. So that will be tomorrow at 6 p.m. on Microsoft Teams. Please message us if you'd like the link to sign up. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you, everyone. Good night.